So my name's Laura Caldy. I'm the SVP of Sales here at Applied Frameworks, and I am very honored to work with folks like Phil and Michael, who will be taking the lead on this webinar. Phil is an SPCT and definitely known in the community for his passion around portfolio management and for successfully implementing and scaling SAFe. So thrilled to have him kind of take the lead on this. And Michael is probably the best RTE that we know of. Has had some incredibly challenging and successful results of kind of stepping into that role. And so I think part of what you're going to hear today, and I'll stop talking in 1 second, is how these two experts here can talk to you about some of the myths and how both of them, as well as Applied Frameworks, kind of thinks about them and how we move forward from that. So I will take it away from here. And as folks have questions, my job is going to turn into making sure that I can weave in some of your ideas and thoughts and questions into this. And so use the Q&A button first if you can. I will be looking at chat as well, but the Q&A will help me keep track of this stuff. So I will turn it over to Phil and Michael, but thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Laura. Thanks everybody for joining. We've got an hour here. I'll tell you that my goal is not to talk for an hour straight. So we're going to go. Mike and I are going to cover the 5 biggest myths that we can think of when it comes to SAFe, and we'll talk about some of the secrets to success that you might have that might help you avoid finding yourself in those situations where you're believing the myths. And then we'll use as much time as possible, I'm hoping at least 20 minutes, to be able to just open up for the questions that you have. So as we're going through, if you've got questions, please do put those into the Q&A section so that we can answer them and have a more open discussion at the end here. But my hope for you is to leave here where you feel like, okay, maybe there's more to this SAFe stuff than I thought. And that's kind of our goal. So Mike, anything you'd want to say?
No, just excited to be here, Phil, and to share our experiences, and would love to get a lot of feedback and questions from the crowd. So that's the biggest part that I'm looking forward here to, is the conversation after our presentation. So excellent.
So 5 biggest myths. Number 1, this is one that I learned, I heard before, during, and after spending a couple of years in the federal market, working with government agencies. And SAFe is rigid and prescriptive. So I will tell you that I consider this to be a myth. However, you can make it true if you want, right? By definition, the framework it's the basic structure of something. It's this set of ideas or facts that provide support for something, support for your journey to business agility. And so by design, it's not a rigid and prescriptive construct. However, sometimes people make it that way, right? So if you want to have an iron fist and implement SAFe as a rigid and prescriptive framework, you absolutely can. Now, I don't believe that I've met anybody who intentionally has done that. However, I found that people have unintentionally done it. So to become an SPC today, it's a tough journey. You've got to take a class, you've got to have some experience and learn this stuff. It's probably the most difficult of the Scaled Agile certification exams. However, it doesn't require you to have experience. It doesn't require you to have a servant leader approach to things. It doesn't require you to put the principles before you put the practices and the processes. And so if you're out there as an SPC and you look at SAFe as a process, you can implement it from a rigid perspective. You can make it prescriptive. One of the things that I heard from one of the government people that I spoke with, somebody who was very adamantly opposed to SAFe, was that every question he asked when he went and visited these Air Force implementations of SAFe, he would ask the SPC, hey, well, with DevOps here, is this really, I mean, what are the DevOps practices? Well, SAFe says DevOps is calmer. C stands for culture. It's like, that's not what this is all about, right? So the framework is something that you can use to make it wonderful, to accelerate your lean agile journey, but it's also something that you can make really rigid and prescriptive. You know, think about some of the experience you might have had with Scrum, right? How many people out there understand that, you know, the Scrum values versus Scrum is what happens when you put requirements in Jira, right? So Mike, anything you'd want to add to this one from your experience?
Just, we did have the experience of a memo coming out with a high level government employee, Phil, that you may want to address to the crowd. They may be familiar with it.
Yeah, it was basically avoid rigid and prescriptive frameworks like SAFe. That's what it said in the memo. And I remember when I told you about that, you were there with your government leader, the actual civil servant. What was his reaction, Mike?
I laughed because that's what happened in the room. Everybody burst out laughing because our experience was so counter to that statement altogether that it just seemed a little ridiculous. So
yeah, and so it really is this. It's what you make of it. Laura, you had something to add?
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed, and my role is supporting folks like Phil and Michael when we're starting an engagement with a client or a customer. And one of the things I've really noticed that I respect is how much attention is paid to the current situation that our customers find themselves in, and then very carefully thinking through what makes sense at what point as we help an organization either start to adopt or to scale SAFe. And I've yet to see either one of these folks, or in fact, any member on my team, approach any customer exactly the same as the last one, right? So I think when you look at it from the perspective of first understanding what the situation is that you are facing as perhaps an SPC in your own organization, if you really pay attention to that, and then you help kind of the leaders and other folks, other stakeholders really align on what the right outcomes would be over time, how you start to implement SAFe really, yes, you have recommendations and a framework to think about, but I think that's the key. You have to think about that and then make some choices, right, about how you want to move forward. And so again, I really enjoy the opportunity to work with both of these folks on this because, like I said, no two starting conditions are the same, and I've yet to see them approach any customer exactly like somebody else.
Yeah, that's a great point, Laura. And I think about my own journey, right? I started with SAFe in 2013, and 2015, I'm in Scotland, meeting these thought leaders, and I'm like, wow, I know everything about SAFe. Well, from studying the framework site and understanding what the model was, understanding the principles, I had the knowledge. But now when I think about looking back over the last several years, what's changed is my ability to articulate the cost of not doing something that the framework recommends, both short-term and long-term. There's things that just seem really, really hard. Like, hey, we can't do a system demo because we can't integrate anything. Okay, great. Well, SAFe says you have to have a system demo. Sure, but if you can't have a system demo, then don't call it a system demo. Because if you start having a system demo and there's no actual integration, you're missing the whole point of having a system demo. And so understanding some of the nuances there are just things that happen over time. Let's keep going here. Mike, you want to take us through the second myth?
Sure. So the second myth we're talking about today is something that we all hear. SAFe will slow us down, right? And the idea here is that I'll tell you a story. With the first start that I was on, our team looked at, hey, SAFe, we really have a lot of dysfunction, and SAFe can answer a lot of the questions for us. And one of the big challenges that we had was centered around the idea of quality. We had a lot of cyber violations in our software to the tune of 200 or 300 at a time. It's a lot of technical debt. And our approach really was to, hey, we're going to make this a centerpiece of what we want to do. We want to up our game in quality. And during our first start, we had some features that were focused on that. And at the end of our system demo, at the end of the PI, we had gotten our cyber violations down to a handful, maybe 3 or 5. And then at the end of the next PI, we had them down to 0, no major violations. So it's just an example of how much you can tackle within the framework if you're really focused on it. It was very beneficial. But the idea was, sometimes you need to slow down a little bit to go forward, to be faster, right? To be more efficient. And utilization is a key factor here, along with the idea of visualizing your your flow through big information radiators like Kanban boards and metrics, with the focus on, hey, if we can measure our flow right now, if we can do things like value stream mapping to identify some of the real delays in our system, then we can make some great progress going forward here. One of the things that is important as well is principle number 2 points out, apply systems thinking. There's, if you're going to make improvements to your art, make sure you're looking at it from a systems point of view, because the idea is you don't want to try to make improvements on localized problems without seeing the impact across the art, or maybe other arts if you're in an environment where there are multiple arts. So understanding that holistic systems view is important. And be sure that you're as Kettering points out here, make sure that you're focusing on a well understood problem. Okay. The idea is here that you want to correct the right problem. You want your solutions to be focused efficiently on the real issue, and your improvement items will flow from that. Okay.
Like, I want to
go ahead.
Add one thing here.
Yeah.
So on the right side of this slide, you've got some information about flow, right? And while it's not in all of the SAFe classes yet, there's a great updated article from earlier this year on metrics. And when I think about Scrum, right, versus SAFe, because that's oftentimes one that people compare and contrast, is that SAFe brings in lean and this whole idea of lean thinking, right? And when you look at principle 2 and you look at slowing down, what you might find is that you get really, really great at delivering software, right? You've got great Scrum and you're delivering quickly, but then it takes you 6 months to get a compensation plan created, and your awesome software that's sitting out there, no one's selling it because you've got a compensation model that's commission based and you need a new comp plan. And so taking that systems thinking perspective and looking at the lead time versus the process time for things, that's something that you would normally do within the framework. Whereas, and that there's a lot of value in acceleration in those types of things when you stop looking just at the agile delivery teams.
All right. Thank you, Phil. So just, Phil touched on this discussion about Scrum and Agile, and a lot of people in the development world experience Agile through the world of Scrum, right? That's really the entirety of their experience through it. And while Scrum is certainly Agile, not all Agile is Scrum, right? You can have Kanban teams as well. And the important thing here is to understand that Agile is foundational to SAFe. It's integral to everything that is designed there. Look at 2 of the 7 competencies, team and technical agility and organizational agility, focus around that idea of bringing agility not only to the teams, but to the team of teams, and beyond that to the whole organization. And that idea of raising the lean and agile mindset to the whole organization, other traditional silos like marketing and finance and HR can all benefit from that. And while you expand that lean and agile mindset across the organization, you get awesome results, because through things like LPM and et cetera, the idea is that the whole organization starts to think along the same way. They start to pull in the same direction. They start to see the same principles and values that are important to the organization, and communicating that and delivering value to the market sooner. Right. So one of the stories I wanted to share today was, again, on an art I was an RTE on. We had an IT group that initially was not part of the original art. But after our first PI, we realized they needed to be. And we started to pull them into the conversation. But their world was very chaotic. Right. They were responsible for hardware and software, networking across the organization. And they never knew from one day to the next what they were going to be focused on, what fire they were going to be fighting. So we started them off as a Kanban team. And the idea was to get them to plan with us as an art to get some predictability into their world, but to allow a lot of buffer there for their emergencies that were showing up every day. So just wanted to make that circle and reiterate that Agile teams are everywhere in the organization and not just in software development. And I think, Phil, you're going to talk a little bit more about that subject on the next slide.
Yeah, Laura, did you have something to add?
Well, I think I know where you're going to go, so I don't need to take much more time than that, other than to just reinforce what Michael said, which is, there are so many other parts of the system that long for a way to be involved. And so on one hand, yes, SAFe isn't prescriptive, but it is scaffolding, and it provides people a clear mechanism for engaging at the right times to be able to provide the right value into the system. Right. So that means that other teams that may have dependencies on what's going on or may feel that they're a bottleneck now have a way to start to address those problems. And I think what that does is open up the opportunity for business agility outside of software development teams. And I think that's kind of a buzzword right now, business agility. But I think what that means is there really is an opportunity for everyone to improve the way they work and to become more agile and to think about what lean means for them outside of just pure software development.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and when you start
answer.
thinking, go ahead, Mike.
I was just saying that's a great ad.
Yeah. When you think about the real scale, start getting into full SAFe and portfolios and solution trains and agile release trains and 5,000 people finding a new way of working, you really do start to see some of those things come to the forefront. But SAFe's not just for software, right? So it depends. There's different ways you can bust this myth, right? So for me, when I hear this, well, SAFe's just for software. First thing that comes to mind for me is, well, tell me something that doesn't have software, right? However, with that, there are ways to apply SAFe to things that have nothing to do with software, right? One of the, I had the honor of working with the Space and Missile Systems Center, Space Force, and work with some amazing people there, from the government side, Lieutenant Colonel Brownlee, and on the Agilist side, Rochelle Maurer and others, who looked at they had agile release trains that were built around different parts of delivering a missile warning capability. And the one agile release train that I worked with Rochelle on to launch was specifically built for systems engineering and integration. So it's a documentation train. There was no software development going on that agile release train. And so leveraging, all these SAFe principles, it allows you to approach any problem this way, right? We mentioned earlier that compensation plan. This is a real story from a financial investment firm back in 2015 or so. And they had 60 plus Scrum teams. It was awesome. The portfolio was lean. They were, everything in the portfolio was focused on Sally, Susie, and Harry. But when it came time to actually sell the products and services that they had built so rapidly, there was no compensation. And so it took months to create a compensation plan. Well, hey, let's look at what would happen if we applied Lean and Agile to a compensation team. So we met in a location in Texas and mapped out what is the value stream to get what has to happen in order to get a compensation plan created and approved. And then we put that into a Kanban flow to start measuring it and look for places where we could actually put in place some WIP limits and things like that. No software development there. And you can, there's so many different places you can do this. Now, little badges on the slides here, right? You can go check out Scaled Agile site and see some of the presentations being delivered by Lockheed Martin and I think Porsche had shared their story last year at the Global SAFe Summit. So there's lots of things there. Now, the flip side of this is you could look at it from also the perspective of huge systems, right? And what you're seeing there on the left-hand side is an excerpt from the Enterprise Solution Delivery Framework articles that Harry Konerman and others have put out, which really talk about how you can apply this to hardware. And there's even a toolkit out there for applying SAFe to hardware and software agile teams. So lots of things there. And last thing I'll say on this is when you look at the bottom right of this slide, those are the 7 core competencies of business agility. You can technically start your journey anywhere you want, right? Most people started with team and technical agility, lean agile leadership, and agile product delivery, but there's so much here that doesn't come down to software, right? How you actually choose to bring people into your company. So anything to add, Mike or Laura, on this one?
Nothing from me, Phil.
So this last one, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on because but it's just, well, SAFe just doesn't work. My response to that is, how many people have you talked to, right? The reality is that, when I think of Dean Leffingwell, I first think of him as a methodologist, but he's also a businessman, right? And when you think about business, most businesses want to be profitable and sustainable. You need both. You need to be profitable and sustainable to be able to stay in business and grow your business. And when you think about SAFe not working, well, how did it become the #1 scaling methodology if it doesn't work, right? Now, back in 2012, 2013, 2014, I could look at that a little differently, but now there's so many examples. And I remember when case studies used to be these written things on Scaled Agile site, but the image on the right here is a whole bunch of links off of the customer success stories that's on Scaled Agile site. And most of the time they're videos now, interviews or presentations. I like the interview ones myself because it's getting real and people share the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And so if SAFe's not working for you, is it because you're basing it on these processes and you're focused on that, right? It's kind of like a daily stand-up, right? If the Scrum Master doesn't show up for the daily stand-up, what happens? Well, sometimes the team's like, yay, we don't have a status meeting today. Other times, the team keeps meeting because they value what happens in there. So when you think about SAFe working or not working, how much of that is based on this? Now, I'll also say, and this is something I think Dalen mentioned in the chat, was that, what is SAFe experience? I've mentored dozens of SPCs, both internal and external, in my journey. And what we look for is, is this somebody who's got 27 things on their resume and they saw SAFe happen? They saw the processes applied, right? Or are they involved deeply in the change and they understand why it worked, right? I'm thinking about JC and Takesha right now, a couple of the SPCs that I met about a year ago, and they're making something happen. They're inspiring change, right? Versus I just have the certification. So if you're out there and you're contemplating SAFe and you're not sure if it's going to work or not, think about who are the people that are going to help you. And personal opinion, you need both. Ideally, if you want to accelerate your journey, you need people who've done it outside your company, but you also need to have people inside who can lead this charge. Eventually, you're going to need to have internal SPCs to be able to sustain that new way of working. So SAFe just doesn't work. I mean, I reach out. I've got lots and lots of examples. They're not. I don't typically lead with with somebody else's story, but I've seen several customers present, and they're out there. I love it to hear. I love it when customers choose to share their stories because that means so much more than somebody who's helped them on that journey. So, Mike, Laura, anything to add to this one about it just not working? I'm thinking about our practice and how it's grown over the last. We've started it 14 months ago with one person.
Yeah, well, I think it's like any change that happens inside an organization where if it's done to people without conversations and input, I don't care what framework you're picking or what change you're trying to make, that's a really hard row to hoe. And it's unnecessary and it's, relatively unfair. So I think part of the approach that we like to take is to, again, really start early and talking to more people and the right people and people you might not expect to be included, right? It's not just the named key stakeholders in the beginning, but it's, people in the trenches who know actually what's going on inside an organization and bring them in early and get insights early into what's happening. And you'll start to identify these internal change agents, people who've been just longing to roll their sleeves up and make some changes. And I think that's how, as an organization, how we try to approach all of the problem solving that we're partnering on with our customers is to come to, join together, join forces and support internal change agents, mentor people to learn how to do this internally. And all of a sudden the environment changes, right? People don't feel that anything is being done to them. They feel like they're leading a direction that's going to improve how they operate, how they work, and how they can produce better, valuable products and services for their customers.
Yeah, and I didn't cover this, but looking at the slide number 2 there, is SAFe held up or does it hold up, right? And I know my first transformation when I was new, 2009, 2010, we had an army of coaches come in and they did amazing stuff with Scrum, but then 6 months after they left, the entire business unit imploded because no change occurred beyond the agile team level. No transparency, no focus on quality. It was basically a different way of dealing with requirements. And that led me to look at scaling and getting beyond the team level. Well, my second transformation was, this is a long time ago, and it was all about me, right? I was the evangelist. I was the one who was holding this up. If people had doubts, I was there to explain to them, this is going to work, right? Still do a little bit of that, but the reality is I have to be able to do this in a way where I'm gone and it's still going. And so when you think about SAFe not working, ask yourself if you held it up and the people holding it up are gone now and it's not going to stick, or are you implementing it in a way that actually allows it to hold up on its own, which kind of takes us to this next section. And this is going to be a little bit quicker and we'll get right in. We're looking at the time, probably 10, 12 minutes on this, then we'll have plenty of time for questions from the groups. So 5, and there's not just 5. These are just the 5 that Mike and I brainstormed that we both aligned on. So number 1, SAFe's the vehicle, not the destination, right? So when I meet a customer or talk to an internal change agent who's focused on measuring how much SAFe they're adopting, right? Now, there's times when you may want to look at number of people trained as leading indicators, but that's not the goal of this, right? The destination is it delighted customers? Is it more value sooner? Is it greater agility? Is it happier people? Maybe it's all of the above, right? And so SAFe is meant to be that vehicle that helps you achieve business agility, but it's a means to an end. It's not the thing to do, right? And I can't think how many times I've met with a group of executives who are all excited about SAFe, and it's like, great, what else besides SAFe are you trying to accomplish? And those that you need those types of conversations. Mike, anything you'd add to this one?
No, I guess just to add, Phil, we often hear comments from executives like that basically boil down to give me the SAFe, right? Let's cut to the chase, give me the SAFe so that we can be successful. And not understanding the role of foundational principles and the changing of the mindset and things like that. So yeah, it becomes more about what about this new way of working are you incorporating into everything you do and the way you think, more than, hey, we're following this process.
It's funny you say give me the SAFe. It makes me think about the big picture, right? This is Scaled Agile calls this the big picture. When you go to the scaledagileFramework.com site, this is the first thing you see. I stopped thinking about SAFe this way a few years ago. And however, a lot of people look at this and they're like, oh gosh, we have to do all that. That's a lot of stuff, right? So first off, you've got some configurations, different places to start. But to me, click on the overview tab. This is SAFe to me. It's these 7 core competencies supported by these 21 dimensions. And these are the things that you'll need. If you try to wait and have that vehicle have all the bells and whistles, right? I mean, think about the things that you may not need. I remember, my wife's last vehicle, there's this gimmicky thing where she can wave her foot underneath the back of the car and the lift gate lifts up, right? And I've seen her use that 3 times. Each time when I said, hey, don't you ever use that? Yeah, I'm using it right now, right? The reality is she's got her key fob, and from a usability perspective, she's walking to her car, she double clicks that and the lift gate ends. So she doesn't wait till she gets there because it actually slows you down to wait to get back to the vehicle. My point on that is that as you learn more about the framework and the different practices here, you might find that right now trying to implement portfolio management with where you are in your journey, because it's such a major mindset shift, is actually going to slow down your whole implementation. And so when you think about SAFe as a vehicle, understand what bells and whistles you need right now, right? So I drove, big guy, but I drove a Honda Del Sol for first 10 years of my marriage, and I loved it. It was a little thinner then, but have a kid. Now it's time for the sedan, right? And so, where you are on your journey and what's going to help you accomplish those outcomes the most is what you want to focus on. Next one, and I kind of already touched on this a little bit. So, choose the drivers and navigators of that vehicle carefully, right? So you definitely want to have people that you trust, right? If you've ever seen some of the stuff I've spoken about in the community, I'm a huge fan of transparency and trust. And I'll just tell you right now, if you don't trust the people that you're working with to help you find this new way of working, whether they be internal or external, you run the risk of having something that's a lot more brittle. If trust is and transparency and alignment are part of the foundational scaffolding you're building, you're going to have a lot more success and a lot more success sooner. These individuals need to be able to inspire change. I think about my confidence back in 2015 versus now. I was way more, I would tell you how awesome I was back then. Now I'm pretty good, right? And the key here is that who is the people inside the company who are going to be able to inspire change, that are going to have the trust. So if you're an external consultant wanting to help a company, you need to have somebody on the inside who you can help cultivate that trust as well, because otherwise you're just going to hold it up for them. And so, think about, who are your change agents? Are they the leaders? Are they the agilists in your COE? Are there SPCs? Do you build them? Do you buy them, or both, right? Do you have internal change agents that you cultivate and help them become experienced SPCs? Do you have partners that help come in? If you do have a partner come in, is it your transformation or is it theirs? I'll tell you that, one of my, the SPCs I've mentored or who've taken my class, they hear me loud and clear on my personal opinion there, which is, hey, it doesn't have to be your transformation for you to be helpful. In fact, saying it's all yours as the consultant can really slow things down. And so, Mike, you had a story you told me once about this on Carnegie Hall.
Yeah, a little funny joke, but the idea of looking at the importance of experience here is, there's this man walking down the streets of New York, and he's clearly a tourist. Anyone can identify that. And he stops to talk to a native New Yorker and asks him a question. And the funny part of this story is that the native New Yorker actually stops to talk to him. And the idea is, he says, "Hey, can you tell me how I can get to Carnegie Hall?" And the native New Yorker doesn't skip a beat, looks him in the eye and says, "Practice, practice, practice." So just a little funny joke to help remember the idea is that it's a lot of work to gain this level of experience and knowledge. There is no shortcut to it. And, for successful implementations, you really want to pull those people in.
Thanks, Mike. All right. No, I got three more to go, and then we'll get to our Q&A. So when we think about a success pattern here, one of them, there's more than one route, right? I mean, everybody's journey begins where you are, doesn't begin where you want to be, right? And so if you wait for all things to be lined up, then you're missing a lot of opportunity cost there, right? The cost of delay on that's very high. But it's okay to start where you are, right? And so transparency is definitely the core value that will help you with that. And you can use things like self-assessments to understand. And those self-assessments aren't designed to be feel good. They're designed to be, hey, let's accept reality here, right? And set your destination. What is it that we're planning on accomplishing? What outcomes are we working towards? Because ultimately, you're going to implement SAFe to accomplish some sort of outcome that matters to you personally, matters to you as a company, as a government agency, whatever. And so create a roadmap. And, this is where understanding that, hey, look, we're going to try heading this direction. Oh, what? That didn't work. That doesn't mean we're not going to go, right? I think about, hey, I need to get to Austin, for the weekend. This is when I'm younger. And it's like, oh, 35 is closed. Well, guess what? I'm still going to get to Austin, right? I will find a way. And so, when you think about that, find that way to get there, right? And watch the road ahead of you. Reroute as needed. I'm a fan of Waze, right? It's like real time, it switches you around. Don't look at this framework as a static map like you had in the glove box when you were a little kid, right? And your dad would pull it out, pull over the side of the road, get his little pen light, and he's trying to track where to go. Well, now it's basically set your destination and go. And if something's in your way, understand it, deal with it in a safe way, and then move around it. So head towards business agility. And part of that, maybe I'm thinking about Mike and I were laughing about Smoking the Bandit, and create a convoy, right? So one of the other parts of this is you're not by yourself on this. And when I think about some of the tipping points, and I say tipping point not from the standpoint of SAFe's implementation roadmap, but the tipping point that moment where the enterprise is they're now going to be okay. Right? What's that moment? Like for me at this Fortune 10 company, it was when the chief marketing officer stood up in May and said, hey, you've now delivered more value this year than you did the entire previous calendar year. You got my attention. At that point, it's like, you know what? They aren't going to need me much longer. They've got this, right? Here's the thing though. Those stories, when told by people inside the enterprise, are so much more powerful. And so you get in a situation where people will start sharing this. We had a hand raised, Laura. Do we want to go ahead and?
Not sure that I see it. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A and the chat. Am I missing a hand raised?
Okay, we can just table that for just a second then. All right. So, you want to add others along the way. So build upon the momentum you have. Now, I will say that, align and communicate. That story I just told you about the chief marketing officer on the business side, seeing the value of this new way of working. Well, the COE then tried to replicate that several times, and they didn't necessarily take the time to understand why it was successful. They said, oh, they're doing SAFe, we'll do SAFe too, right? So you want to really understand and get to know this. I'm a huge fan of Gemba. Right, when the Agile release training in the government sector is a joint U.S. Air Force and U.S. Army futures program that Mike was the RTE for, and I had the honor of helping them on their journey, and at the same time I was working with some individuals from NASA, and as a outside coach, I facilitated connecting the government leaders on the NASA side and the Army Air Force side, so that they could have a conversation. And it was awesome to see them bring, this government leader from NASA come and watch the PI planning event that the government leader was doing, so that they could actually see what's involved before they start. If you've never seen a PI planning event, I recommend you see two, at least one really good one and one not so really good one. And that contrast allows you to really see, but that alignment and understanding why something changed. And so build that momentum, not by being that evangelist, because, if that company I used to work for could change based on my passion alone, it would have. But it takes many individuals being willing to brave this new way of working. And the last thing I'll say here is that you want to be able to run this engine forever. In the bottom right of this screen, you have this infinity flow of sustainability and profitability, right? I'll tell you, the word profitable doesn't get me up in the morning. The word sustainable does, right? And what I realized over the years, and I work with a lot of portfolio leaders and a lot of senior execs, is that you can't be profitable if you can't be sustainable. But you also can't be sustainable if you're not profitable, because you're just not going to be in business anymore, right? Or and for government agencies, you may have to find a different word besides profitable, maybe viable or valuable. If you're not valuable to the taxpayers, then eventually you're not going to be able to sustain things. And so on the left-hand side, we kind of see this plan, do, check, adjust, expanded view that's on the framework site. And really, there's always opportunities. That Kaizen mind of there's always more opportunities. Speaking of minds, there's the mindset, right? Ultimately, you're going to move to a more generative culture, away from pathological cultures and bureaucratic cultures. And you're going to need to have this growth mindset. But this is deep change. And so you're always going to be pursuing it. So with that said, I think I'm good with this content. Mike and Laura, any other things, or can we jump right into the Q&A?
Yeah, I have a question that I think is a nice bridging one to some of the concepts that you brought up, and how organizations might create this group of change leaders who can help, internally guide change. So Logan asked, well, what do you do if you have a LACE, you want to build a LACE, you have identified people who do want to be part of the change, and yet it's not seen as a full-time job or something that you can't fund. It's sort of like, hey, in your spare time, do this, right? And so I'd love to hear what both of you think, but my mind right away goes to the reasons behind that are socialized, the reasons behind the change, or the reasons behind the adoptions happening in the first place. And I think for companies that are looking at it as a process and how many arts can I launch, perhaps they're struggling with this. How do we think about a LACE, right? And for those who are looking at, are we sustainably profitable? Are we delivering value more quickly? And they're looking at all of those outcomes. Justifying this as a real position and a real, I guess, catalyst for change might be a little easier to do if you're looking at outcomes rather than outputs. And so that was where my head went, but I'd love to hear if you have any stories around that, or how do you help companies with this problem?
It happens more than you think, right? Where, in fact, I've been in situations where they've hired us, and it's like, okay, let's you want us to help you launch agile release trains, and it's, well, we've got Bob over here for 1 hour a week, and Joe over there for 2 hours a week. Okay, well, we have to be able to talk to people. We have to be able to understand the landscape here, right? And so it's kind of like, being able to set the expectations. So, when I get started with a transformation, this is, and I've been an internal and consultant as well as an internal change agent. And the reality is that what are the expectations you have here, right? So if you expect, Mike said, give me the SAFe, right? And give me the SAFe. Well, you need 2 SPCs, and that's going to make SAFe this wonderful, awesome thing that we're leveraging. The reality is this is hard change sometimes. Sometimes it's easy. And really, just like an agile team, imagine if you had an agile team that had 2 people on it who could spend an hour a week. What would you set expectations from the standpoint of how much work they could actually get done? And so that's a tough conversation to have. And, in the framework, there's this concept of the tipping point for implementation. And it's either where leaders they want to avoid a situation where they're not going to be able to compete, or they're not able to compete and something's changed and they've got to make a shift. And so really, they think the key there is understanding and setting, understanding what you're trying to accomplish and setting the reality there, because, a few hours a week, can you make a difference? Yes. Is it going to take longer? Yes. Right. And so, in those situations, personally, if I would say, what is the one thing we're going to try, right? Like, what's one thing that we can do in this new way of working? And let's do that. And maybe it's not launching an agile release train. Maybe it's a matter of understanding the larger horizons of work. Hey, instead of just going right to stories, let's map out what we want to accomplish over the next quarter, right? And what are those techniques you can use? Because it's a framework. You can take what you need when you start. So start small team, small start, but get that early win and move on from there. What other questions do we have?
Right. We have another one here about, can you talk about any good approaches or techniques for the conversation with engineering or PMO leaders regarding what their role is in the SAFe framework?
Mike, you want to take the first half of that and I'll take the second half?
Sure. I thought you were going to take this one, so I didn't think about it, to be honest. But the idea here is, okay, so you want to approach this, again, from a systems point of view, right? The idea is you want everybody to be part of what you are doing. And that starts with the idea of establishing some psychologically safe environment where you can have those questions, that people can have those conversations about what is their role and how do you pull those folks into it, right? You'll get, just like in any group, you'll get people pushing back, you'll get people embracing it. but working through those discussions and having alignment around the fundamentals and the principles of SAFe and lean and agile in general is what will make you successful later on. Okay, so having that foundation gives you that place where you can explore that together and have alignment around what are you trying to achieve as a group. Okay, what's everybody's role in that, and how do we work together to achieve that mission, to execute on it. So Phil, I'll let you continue on with that.
Yeah, so on the, just make sure, Laura, how are we doing the questions? Are techniques for approaching conversation with engineering or PMO leaders?
Yeah,
that's where my head's at, and
yep.
I'll let you funnel the questions to us to make sure we get to them all.
Yeah, and just so that people know, even if you don't think you're going to get to them, give them to us anyway, because we will answer them in the little email that we'll send out to everybody that has a link to the recording. So part of what we're interested in is actually knowing what all your questions are, even if we don't have an answer to answer them all here. Gives us fodder for the next webinar.
So I would say, Matthew, approaching the conversation with engineering, really it's the same way I would approach it with the PMO leaders when it comes to what do you know about it, right? And find out what their perspective is. And when I look at the PMO leaders, if you go to the Scaled Agile Framework site, right, and you do a search and you type in PMP, right, which is a lot of your PMO leaders, and you hit enter, there's oh, wait a second. No, that's PMPO. So there's actually nothing on the site, right? So we'll maybe try to search for project manager. Mike mentioned psychological safety, and this is scary, and what I'll tell you, so there's nothing on here. There is no role of a project manager directly in the framework. However, those people have valuable skills. They have relationships. They have organizational skills. They have understanding of the solutions that other people may not have. And so when you look at mapping roles, which I wouldn't recommend you do without conversations, but you think about it, it's really a matter of here are the opportunities to participate. Some of these are more facilitation and servant leadership roles. Some of these are more strategic roles. Some of these roles are more, we still have governance, right? And so there's a skill, there's a place for those individuals. There was a wonderful lean agile leader named Amy at this Fortune 10 company. And she said, one of the quotes I have, we were mapping things out and looking at the implementation, launching several arts. And she's like, we're coming up with names for people. It's like, if you need a bleep project manager, have a bleep project manager, right? And I kind of take that same take on it. When you look at large systems like a missile warning system, you're going to need some project management skills. And so there's a place for those. And I think that's really the message, Matt, would be, hey, there's a place for lean agile leaders all throughout the framework, and you've got some valuable skills, and we'll find a way to apply those. Laura, do you want, I guess next, I'm looking kind of at as a person here on, I only have a couple more minutes. The myth of SAFe isn't agile, interested in all the articles, blogs, et cetera, related to the topic. It's interesting. If SAFe is agile at its core, why have all the authors of the Agile Manifesto come out? So this is my personal opinion, right?
Yeah. So I, just to butt in. So the full question is, how come the authors of the Agile Manifesto haven't come out in support of it and are in some cases opposed? Just so, because not everyone can see the typed question.
Oh, thank you, Laura. So here's my question: how many taxi cab companies, right, who were delivering people from one destination to another, are talking about how awesome Uber is? Right. The reality here is Dean Leffingwell is an entrepreneur and a businessman, as well as a methodologist. And he disrupted the agile market with this idea that you don't have to be a specialized person to be able to help people on their journey. Right now, we've seen from the myths that came up, there's a downside to that, right? Has anybody ever gotten to a stinky Uber? I know I have, or somebody where it's like the person just talks and talks and talks, right? The ones where there's like a cloud of smoke when you open the door are the ones that really get me, but it doesn't happen very often. Point being, though, is that there's this is a different way of approaching things. And so imagine if you've put your heart and soul into lean and agile, in Scrum for your career, and along comes somebody who monetizes it in a way and scales it in a way that leaves you with not much. Right now, that's my personal opinion. I've interviewed people who are detractors of SAFe. I wish I had a recording. This is back with I had a meetup back in 2015. We didn't record, but there was one of the very notable people from the Scrum side of things who I had a debate with in front of an audience of 20, 30 people about SAFe. And ultimately he's like, oh, I guess it can work. Right. But what's in it for them to be able to say that it works? Right. I mean, they've got competing methodologies. And quite frankly, I've leveraged Scrum at Scale, Nexus, Spotify-ish, and there's still a place for those. I personally like SAFe because it's faster. I've seen more accelerated, deeper change, and it covers a whole bunch of things that other things don't. But I'll pause there. I think that hopefully answers your question. And also, I will say that there's people that, we don't typically reach out and try and convince them. One of my mentors and I had a conversation about me trying to convince somebody who won't be convinced. And the reality is why would what would be the value for him to publicly say, yeah, SAFe is great? There's none.
One of the things that I'll add in here as well is the history and evolution of applied frameworks has been one of a company that tries, incredibly intentionally to be very aware of and able to function with a whole set of frameworks, whether they're very tactical role-oriented frameworks or some of the meta frameworks. And I put SAFe in that category, certainly, but, even things like design thinking and less and that kind of thing. And I think one of the things that we've kind of recently honed in on is that our passion, where we really think we can help our customers excel, is around this idea of profitable sustainability. And so what that really means is some of the areas that need to be tackled and improved inside an organization are called out more explicitly inside the SAFe framework. So, part of that kind of that system that'll end up kind of maturing inside an organization that really is focused on sustainable profitability for, obviously software powered products and services end up being pretty complex in that area. And so, SAFe talks about and has elevated product management as kind of a key piece to that, and business models and portfolio level decisions. And so as you start to peel away at those areas of the framework, there are opportunities to go deeper. And I think that's where Applied Frameworks is really starting to create some additional supportive tools around, well, how do we reason about and think about what profitability means for a software powered product and service? So I think, selfishly, we look at the Scaled Agile Framework as a way of having to do less work in that area in order to help make big impacts around profitability when we're partnering with our customers. So it's not that we don't like the other frameworks, and we even still do some work in those areas, but what we're being asked to help with is around sustainable profit. And we find more wind in our sails, I guess, if we are thinking about where SAFe may or may not fit in, first, right? It tends to help with the problems that need to be solved in a more expeditious way.
Laura, I'm looking at our time box here and looking at some of the great questions. I think looking at the unanswered questions, as Laura mentioned, we'll reply to you via email and send these out. But I'm seeing some things here, right? What are the best qualities for an RTE? What should we hire for? Right? More examples of successful versus unsuccessful PI planning. Key people to have in the lace. Applying COD to the government sector. Consequences of not implementing specific tools. How to balance meet them where they are and not compromising the point where the implementation fails. And so I think that our next one, Laura, is a deeper dive into actually, how do you have success with SAFe at the art level? I think that's really where we can address all those questions. If you're interested, it'd be something that we do. I want to answer the rest of these questions, and I'm personally, this is how I learn. And so Mike and I will reply back to anybody who asked a question with your name on it. Laura and Michael and I will get back to you with an answer, and potentially look at building that into a future webinar. Last couple things here. Hey, if you're interested, in continuing your learning journey, I love teaching to help other people on their journey. We are not a training company. We don't, do training. That's all we do. But as an SPCT, I have an obligation to help build the SPC community. So we teach implementing SAFe. I have a passion for lean portfolio management and for release train engineers. So these are the classes that we currently have offered. And if you're interested in engaging us in your journey, it's kind of funny there. That's RoboPhil there. I wasn't able to attend. Everybody else was there, and I got an iPad on a Segway, which was pretty awesome. But anyway, there's lots of different things that we can help you with, right? Whether it's you want to do a full implementation of portfolio management or use it as an accelerant, get alignment, so that you have more success with your solution delivery. Whether you want to speed up fast, oftentimes we'll partner with internal change agents. And the idea here is that as we engage with you, we're giving you all our tips and tricks so that you don't need us anymore. Or product management, sustaining that profitability, or leadership coaching, mentoring, blah, blah, blah. So we love to help if we can. I appreciate everybody's time. Mike, do you have any, and Laura, you have any closing thoughts?
No, I just loved the discussion. Some great questions came out today that are sparking lots of thoughts for blogs and webinars in the future. So thank you all for being here and taking part in this. We appreciate you all.
And please do send, I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's okay, Phil. I was just going to remind people that it'll take us a couple of days to process the recording, but we will follow up with answers to questions along with a link to the recording, and definitely appreciate all of your involvement.
Yeah, if you have suggestions, let us know. It's for me, I want to see more great agility out there, and SAFe can help, as opposed to hinder. So thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks, folks. See you next time.
And I had to get a typo in at the last second.